Welcome to the podcast of Clearview Church. We believe seeing Jesus changes everything and everyone. We hope you enjoy this week's message.
You know, we have been going through this process of really telling you who our church is with this series. Not just who we are, but why we practice what we do. And really showing you that we're not just here because we want to be. We do want to be here, but we have a purpose, and that's to show you Jesus as clearly as we can. And we do that through multiple different avenues. Today specifically, I'm up here talking about just practicing our faith in a way that is safe for the generations after us. In a way that, like Ethan said, we can allow our children not to feel anxious about their faith and not to feel bad about having the questions. We want to be a safe place for those kids. So I'm gonna read, I guess, just the main verse that we're going to be focusing on today, and we'll come back to it several times throughout this. But why don't you read with me? This is Genesis chapter 39, 20b through 23. It says, "But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did." I do want to put emphasis on, this isn't necessarily about the last part of that. This isn't prosperity gospel. Like, we're not talking about the success part of this. We're not saying that everything you do will be successful. Sometimes it just doesn't play out like that, but it's just the fact that God was there, right? And like I said, that'll come back into play in a minute. But first, I want to tell you a story. I've shared this story a few times. It's been a while, so I'm giving it to you again. There's a lot of new faces. This is how I learned that I was bad at hide and seek. Now, you may look at me and say, "Of course you're bad at hide and seek." It makes sense. I get it. But this is how I specifically learned that I was bad at hide and seek. I got my first ministry job at 19. We can talk later about hiring 19-year-olds to lead people the same age as him. But I got my first ministry job at 19, and it was a student ministry gig, super part-time. But I guess this was their way of testing me. And so as I was in my second interview where they were hiring me, they said, "This is going to be your first job. This is going to be the first time you interact with these students. We're doing a lock-in." If you know what a lock-in is, they're terrible. Even as a student, I never enjoyed the process of staying up all night. I am a sleeper. It's what I do, especially when I have to manage other people's kids. But they said, "You're going to do this lock-in," and so they gave me a tour of the church, and they said, this is this, and I don't know why, but this one specific room stuck out to me. They were taking me through, and they said, "This is our storage room, our overflow room. This is where we keep everything." And they opened the door, and it was like a jungle of metal. There's chairs stacked up high. There's tables everywhere, right? This is just we don't want to deal with this right now. We're packing it in there. And so that room, I don't know why, it stuck out to me. And so fast forward about a week or two, we're at this lock-in, and you know, as a 19-year-old put in charge does, I say, "We're going to play hide and seek, and it's going to be in the dark." So we shut the lights off to the whole church. This is an older church, doesn't have many windows, and it's pitch black. The only person that gets a flashlight is the person seeking. The way we did this, because we didn't want to destroy anything, we said, if the light shines on you, that's tag. Like, that's how you know that you're out, whatever. So we do this, and of course, as a 19-year-old, I'm like, I'm not going to be it first. And as the newly elected staff member, I say, I have authority to say that. So I was like, I'm not it first. And I had brought this friend along with me who was not as big as I am, but pretty close. And so I was like, look, I know where to hide. There's this jungle of metal room. We're going to go there. We're going to dig our way in under the tables, under the chairs. This is what we're going to do. He's like, all right. So we start the game, and me and him bolt. We get to this room. Immediately, we're like stubbing toes, kicking each other, climbing under stuff. And I'm like, this is going to be the best hiding spot ever. They're never going to find me in here. Fast forward maybe like a minute and a half. The door opens, flashlight, right on my face. Right on my face. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, that. No, how did you find me? Like, we have been kicking each other. We've been bumping our heads on metal. Here's what I did not know. Interview, week-long lock-in. In that week, they had cleared that room out. There was one table, 3 chairs, 2 very large people hiding under one table, 3 chairs. It was dumb. I didn't think about it. I could have easily turned the light on when I opened the door and just said, all right, this isn't going to work. Didn't do that. Went in, right? You ever do that? You ever go into a situation and you're like, I got this. I know everything there is to know about it. I'm in here. Any of you ever do that? Okay. So I'm not the only idiot in the room. It's all right. I'm sorry for calling you an idiot. I don't think you're an idiot. I can be. So I think that the way that I went into parenting was very similar. We have a 6-year-old, and she's great. She's fantastic. I make mistakes all the time, right? I went into this, and I was like, I'm going to be a great parent. Kids like me. I'm fun. You can easily, with kids, find yourself in a spot where you're like, I'm an idiot. There's a spotlight right on my face. I'm hiding under a table, right? That's how I figured out I was bad at hide and seek. And I'll readily admit that I feel that way often in parenting. I am, it really does feel like somebody just busted in the room and found me immediately, and I'm like, I should have done something different. Should have did this before that. And I don't think it's any coincidence that John plugged me into this last week of the Preaching What We Practice story. I kind of made it my own resolution this year to just make sure that I am someone who not only just makes Athena feel safe in life, but makes sure that she feels safe in her faith with God, the questions she has. She's 6, but she's a deep 6. She thinks. And so there's often times where we're just driving down the road to Target. She's like, what do you think God thinks about this? Or, what do you, like, where is God? Things like that. And it's just like, you're young and you're thinking about things like this. And so I just kind of made it my own goal this year just to think about how I interact with her in those moments. But also I told you I'm the student minister. We have been going through this series on the Trinity, specifically focused on, right now, the role of God as the parent. And so we've been going through, we started in the beginning and with Genesis, and we've been going through that. And it just fell into line so perfectly, And then Ethan gets up here and talks about how as he was growing up, he was nervous about the questions he has. And so I don't think that there's any coincidences here. But I wanted to kind of take y'all, or just invite y'all to enter in this journey that we've been going through with the teens, because there's quite a few of them in here. Normally, I teach them anyway. It kind of fits, but today you guys get to be part of that. So we've been going through this track of God's parenting, essentially. We started with creation. And we really put that emphasis on the difference of God's creation of mankind versus everything else, right? God taking the time and forming mankind and then speaking everything else into existence. There's a distinct difference in that creation. God saying, I'm going to make them in my image. Nothing else is really made in his image, right? Then we get to the fall. And we have this moment where everything seems to be kind of messed up and we think that everything is going to go away. And then God says, I get that this was the ideal situation, but I'm willing to abandon that to follow you, right? So even though Adam and Eve have to leave the garden, God goes with them. And he says, I will let that be what it is. I want to be with you. Abraham and Isaac, God calling Abraham to do something very difficult, but then saying, actually, that's my role, not yours. I'm the one that's going to make that sacrifice. I'm the parent in this. I want to be the one to cover for you. And so again, this role that he is the one that's willing to take the extra steps. So I figured why not let y'all be a part of that? And I mean, this is kind of the topic where I'm at anyway. So I'm going to read some verses with y'all, and this is actually a precursor to what I read at the beginning. This is we've been talking about Joseph. We went into this last Wednesday, specifically on the beginning of Joseph's role. Joseph is the youngest child. He's the favorite. He's kind of annoying. His brothers throw him in a hole and, kind of forsake him and then sell him into slavery. Normal sibling behavior, right? And so I want to read this with y'all. This is Genesis 39, the beginning. It says, Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything that he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph. I think we'll stop there because there are kids in the room. It's keep this as PG as possible. Joseph's called a break, right? We just led off with the fact that his brothers literally trapped him in a hole, were contemplating killing him, and instead sold him into slavery, right? So what we've done here is we fast-forwarded, and we realize that while, yes, he is a slave, he's doing pretty well, right? And so there's this idea that Joseph is called a break, right? And we did read that earlier, and he's given success in what he's doing. He's called a break, but there's a pattern that starts here, right? Do y'all know what happens next? What happens next? Potiphar's wife tempts him. He resists because of that. She gets her feelings hurt, and alleges that he did some things that he did not, and he's thrown in prison, right? What happens after that? He does get out eventually, not immediately. He spends some time there, ends up basically in charge of the prison, right? So he ends up kind of running things in prison. He is guessing, or he's interpreting people's dreams. He's doing well. There's more talk about God being with him, showing him favor, right? Do y'all know that when the Bible talks about God's favor being on somebody, it's more so talking about his grace, and God is showing them grace, and he is saying that you are worth something. I am with you. I'm not leaving you. So there's these. We can go through illustration after illustration. Joseph catches a break. Something happens, and he kind of loses that, right? But eventually, he gets out of that pattern. But I think the most powerful part of this, and we'll go back to verse 20. Okay. It says, but while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness. He granted him favor. He's showing kindness and granting favor through all of that, right? He is with Joseph. Joseph has high, low, right? High, low, win-loss. He has faith. He has doubt. He has faith. He has doubt. God never abandons him in that. The whole time it talks about God being with Joseph. But that isn't just us. It isn't just Joseph. It's us, right? We all have these highs. We have the lows. We have faith. We have doubt. We have wins. We have losses. And so just this idea that God is there spending time with us and really getting to know us and showing us kindness, and he has favor on our lives, right? Where's Brienne? Blessed and highly favored, right? We're in a small group with the Young Bloods and many other families, but we always kind of, I'll call it what it is. We make fun of like the phrase, "Oh, I'm blessed and highly favored," right? How are you today? I'm blessed and highly favored. Things are good right now, so I'm blessed and highly favored. When in reality, we are always blessed and highly favored because God is with us, right? So there is no I'm having a good day, so I'm blessed and highly favored versus this is the worst day ever. God hates me, right? I want to tell you a very cute story about my kid. So every night we have this ritual. We, as one does, we read Harry Potter, and then we pray. It's 2024, y'all. We read Harry Potter, and then we pray. Every now and then, I will just tell her, I think you should pray tonight, right? She has the same prayer over and over, right? That's just how kids are. But I love the way that she starts her prayer. Every time we ask her to pray, she says, "God, we love your heart," right? Now, I want you to think about something. I didn't grow up praying like that. I was taught as a kid, if you're going to address God, it needs to be in reverence, like Holy Father or Blessed Father or God on high or something like that, something showing essentially reverence to God. I will never tell her that she should not start her prayer with an intimate way for God. I think it's so powerful. I think that she is telling me exactly what she needs. I think she is telling me that she wants to feel connected to God, right? I love the idea that she wants it, right? She wants to feel loved by God. She doesn't want to just know that he is somewhere. She wants to know that he's there and that she can trust him. Has anybody read Woven? Anybody? Okay, we got a couple of hands. There's this I don't want to call it like a craze or a fad, but there's this very popular book right now by Meredith Miller. We're going to get into that a little bit today. I'm not going to read excerpt after excerpt, but there is a lot of good stuff in this book. It's called Woven by Meredith Miller. One of the bigger points of at least the beginning of this book, is the idea that we live in a moralistic type of faith kind of world. Essentially, like moralistic being the idea that we have to be good to get good. Like, you have to do this the correct way. You have to mind your parents. You have to listen to the elders. You have to, essentially, you just have to do the right thing over and over so that you can get to heaven, right? And she goes on to say, like, that we, at least for us millennials, and maybe the generation before, we were raised in this type of list management faith. Like, I have to check this off. I have to check this off. I have to pray the right way. I have to read the right passages. I have to feel this way about politics. I have to connect with only these. Like, it's very specific type of faith. Did anybody feel like that growing up? I did. I'm a little bit older than Ethan, not too much, but my entire upbringing in the church was more of a fear over faith, right? And what I mean by that is, I can't remember anyone ever talking to me about the good that comes from the relationship, just that I had to have one, or bad things were going to happen, right? It was very turn or burn, right? And I think I always had a really hard time engaging in a relationship with Jesus. I grew up going to church. It was just what people in my tiny little town did. Nobody really skipped church. It was you go to church because that's how you get to heaven. You do these things because that's how you get to heaven. But I never felt like anybody was pointing me towards a nurturing type of relationship with Jesus. And I don't think that I ever truly learned that Jesus really loved me until I was 17 years old, when I decided that I was like, no, I'm going to spend my life in a relationship with Jesus. But that was the first time I ever felt like Jesus loved me, right? I always knew that I had to do things and check things off to get to heaven, but I never felt like Jesus loved me. I'm going to read to you this quote from Meredith Miller. It's from Woven. It says, yes, obedience is talked about a lot in the Bible, but obedience is not our goal, because ultimately it is not God's goal. Trust is. I think that that's really powerful. Realizing that the stuff that was happening to me in my faith growing up was happening to an entire generation. I think it's what makes this Woven book, I think it's what makes it so interesting to me. I'll tell y'all, I do not like to read. I can't tell you how many times John has put a book in front of me and is like, read this, and then a month or two later he's like, do you read it? And I'm like, no. I don't read, and if I do, it's usually about dragons, right? A kid being turned into a dragon, people fighting a dragon, people riding dragons. Like, it just kind of centralizes around dragons. Looking at me, you may not know that I like books about dragons, but now you do. But this book, I do find it very interesting, and I am probably reading it way slower than anybody else. The other night, she wanted to watch TV, and she's like, are you done yet? And I was like, I got like 40 more pages. And she's like, oh, that's like 30 minutes. And I was like, it's going to be all night. Because I'll read a page, and I'm like, I need to go back and read that. because I did not pay attention. But this book called me in, and it, I don't know, it's just realizing that I wasn't alone. So Ethan, if you ever feel like you're alone in that kind of anxious fear, you're not. But it gives me such hope for the generations coming after, because I get a chance as a student minister and as a parent to let them know that we can talk to them about their faith. We can be a part of that faith journey. We don't have to just give them this list and say, check this off, check this off, check this off, then you'll go to heaven. It's God's already here, right? He's here with us. And what are we doing to show them that trusting, loving, nurturing God who shows them favor and is kind to them is there right beside them? I have another job. I work in the juvenile court system, and specifically with kids who have committed minor offenses, and we get chances to meet with them and hope that we can get them off this path that they're on before it gets worse. And because of that, I've had to go through a lot of different kind of trainings and stuff like that. One of them specifically, it feels like the worldly equivalent to what we're talking about here today. It's called Trust-Based Relational Intervention, TBRI for short. But it's this training of how to connect with kids who have either been through something traumatic or have had significant losses, traumatic, essentially just different types of trauma, and how to connect with them in that moment when they are starting to elevate versus the overcorrection that most parents would jump to. Me being one of those. That's something I'm working on. I don't ever want to make my kid feel like you're not being good and I'm not happy with you. Not saying that kids shouldn't be good. I don't ever want to project that we as a church don't believe that your kids shouldn't be good, but it's not the main point, right? I want to read a passage from Galatians for you, and you'll all know what it is. It's the fruit of the Spirit. This is Galatians 5:22 through 26. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." This is the attributes of a Christian, right? This is the things that we get from our relationship with Jesus. I do want to point out that goodness is in there, right? But there's so much more. Does that make sense? It's not just about the obedience, right? And if anybody wants to know what forbearance means, it's the practice of patience. I've always read peace, patience, and when I saw that, I was like, I don't know what that means. It's practice of patience. There's a ton of passages in this Bible that talk about being obedient. Obedience, like I read the quote earlier, obedience is all throughout the Bible, but so are the rest of those. The peace, the patience, the kindness, the gentleness, right? I want to really draw that one out because sometimes when a kid is not being good, it's hard for us to be gentle, right? So there's so much more to it. I'll give you another Woven quote. This is Meredith Miller from Woven. "Our role is to offer kids a healthy, life-giving, love-filled space in which to grow. To bypass the process and jump straight to obedience is dictating, not that's supposed to say not discipling. Did not mean to put discipline on there. Not discipling. You want to know why so many people, specifically millennials, left the church after graduating? We got tired of being ruled by this dictator-type God, right? We were always told that we had to do it exactly this way, and nobody ever told us that God was there welcoming us the whole time. We never felt welcome. We bolted because we didn't have anything real to latch onto. It's hard for us to trust a God that we don't know is good, right? That he's showing us goodness, he's showing us kindness, he has favor over our lives. If we don't know that, then it's hard for us to just want to be good for whatever reason in the hopes that we can make it to heaven. Stephen Bullivant, this guy's smart. He's way smarter than anybody I've ever really tried to read anything of. But this guy, Stephen Bullivant, he wrote a book called Nonverts, The Making of Ex-Christian America. And I want to read you a quote from it. It says, "The United States is in the midst of a religious revolution, or perhaps it is better to say a non-religious revolution. Around a quarter of U.S. adults now say that they have no religion. The great majority of these religious nones also say that they used to belong to a religion and no longer do. These are non-verts. Think converts, but from having religion to having none. There are currently about 59 million of them in the United States." That book was published in 2022. Since publishing that book, the number has now risen from 25% to 30%. That's a little over 1 in 4 people who will not only leave the church, but they're going to leave their faith, right? That's what's happening here. I'll say this. I think that faith is meant to be attractive, not destructive. I think that our relationship with Jesus is meant to be attractive, not destructive. And I think that the faith that we show our children should be attractive and not destructive. I recently polled, I guess is the word, polled our teenagers here in CSM. I just wanted to know what they thought was so important about their parents being faith nurturers to them, essentially saying, like, why is it so important for you to feel safe in your faith with your parents? And so you'll see I've included several quotes from actual teens that go to this church in today's lesson. So I'm going to start with this one. This is from Jake. It says, "I love the idea of understanding who God is instead of having people use scare tactics to influence my faith." He wants to know God, right? He doesn't want to know that God is judging him and overlooking everything. The communion song today, that's the first time I've ever heard that song. And I love that line about like God seeing us and smiling. I don't know exactly how it was put, but like that's what I want to know. If I am working on my faith and I am trying to take steps, I want to know that I don't want it to just be like, oh, I got to make God happy. Like I want to know that God is showing me kindness and showing me favor and is genuinely happy to just be a part of my life. Because there are parts of this Bible that say that he is. He's happy to be with us, and he loves us, and he wants to be there. Even when we fall, he's saying, I don't have to have this ideal kid. I want you, and I just want you to know that I'm with you, right? We're partners here. We told you not too long ago that this church, for this year, our goal is just to invest in the kids and the students here, right? And we don't just mean that financially. Like, we are fully invested in making sure that the kids here know that they are loved, that God is showing them kindness and favor, and that they're safe. And if they have questions, we want to answer it. But we can't do that alone. That's a hard job, right? And that's where you guys come in, because these kids are with y'all. They see us a couple times a week, but these kids are with y'all. We're partners. We want to invite y'all to help us introduce faith to your children, and let them know that God is here. But that cannot be done only by one of us. It's going to take both of us. Yeah. So here's the question. We have a question for you. How can we help you nurture your child's faith? So we don't want to just tell you that your child's faith needs to be nurtured. We want to try to give some insight, maybe give some helpful tools. So in true John fashion, I've created a list specifically of 4 different things. So we'll skip ahead to number 1. Number 1 is faith isn't just about eternity. I think that this is important to know. Faith isn't just about our eternity. I told you earlier, growing up, it was this idea that I had to do good to get good. Eventually, because I was doing good, I would get into heaven. I would get there and be able to experience God. But I think it's important for our kids to know that God isn't just waiting for us at the end of time. He's here. He's now. The Bible tells us that constantly, that He is with us. He's showing us kindness and favor. So He's with us now. And I put up some examples. This is kind of like a beginning to end kind of deal. All of Genesis, God is there. We see that. He's talking with all of these characters. I don't want to say characters, they're people. He's here with them. He's talking to them. He's showing them grace. He's making it known that He's a part of their lives. All of Exodus, right? Like He's literally following people around, smoke by day, fire by night, right? Psalm 139, this is David talking about just the fact that God's presence is there. And he's like, everywhere I go, you're there. Like, I cannot get out of your presence because you're here with me. Matthew, this is the birth of Jesus, Matthew 1, where they focus on the name Emmanuel, God with us, right? God physically came to be with us. Matthew 28:20, this is Jesus talking to the disciples. He said, I'm with you until the end of the age. And then after the death and resurrection in John 14, God says, I am creating a new way that I will be with you always, right? I will be with you always. And He's talking about the Holy Spirit. We'll move on. Number two is expectation versus experience. I think it's so important for our kids to know, or not just to know, but to see faith in action, right? And this is mainly about you guys. Yes, Wednesdays, Sundays, they see faith in action through their ministers. Wednesdays and Sundays, we see, running late. Our kids need to see our faith in action, not just hear our expectations on how they should live them out. Jesus' entire relationships with His disciples involved living out His faith time after time, showing them by example how to interact with God. We'll skip to number 3. We got to talk to them, right? Our kids need to know that they can talk about their faith. Like Ethan was saying earlier, whether we realize it or not, our kids have questions about faith. Sometimes deep questions, sometimes silly questions. But the important thing here, and I'm not telling you have to have every answer, I'm just telling you have to be interested. They need to know that you're interested in helping them walk through their faith. Again, like I said earlier, we can't expect them to be good for a God that they don't know, right? And I think that leads into number 4, is community. And this is the Clearview aspect of it. We have Kids View volunteers every Sunday. We have parents leading student breakouts. We have small groups happening all across the week. These are all people that are interacting with your kids. Meredith in that book calls them faith cheerleaders. These are people that don't just have something important for the moment, but can end up being influential people in our kids' faith for years to come, right? All right, I got 2 more quotes for you from students in Kids View. This is Kingsley. It says, "It's important to have community that fosters spiritual growth. We need others to grow with." And then right after that, we have Silas. It says, "Having a healthy community, a good community to be in is important. You can enjoy knowing God together." That's so powerful. Not just know God together, but enjoy knowing God together. I thought that was incredible. I told y'all earlier, the retention rate for kids after leaving their parents' home and staying in the church, it's astronomically low. And so many of these young adults have since admitted that they left the church because they didn't feel safe. They didn't have positive reinforcement, and they weren't allowed to ask questions. And I think that we need to figure out if we're okay with that. I think me and Shelby have full faith, knowing that Athena is going to grow up in this community where she knows that God loves her. We're always going to be willing to remind her that God loves her. But this is the important part. We're asking you to be a part of that, right? Because there's so many of y'all that interact with her. I want to put up a picture. This is our church. This is our last picture that we took as a whole church at our church birthday party. You can see all of our kids there at the front, and standing right behind them is the parents, right? And not just the parents, but the friends, the small groups, the Kids View leaders, the people who are leading breakouts for the teens. That picture right there is communicating exactly what I'm talking about. Like, our kids need to know that they're in a safe place where they can feel safe, have questions, talk to people, and have those people interact back with them, right? I think that's the most powerful thing that can be shown on this stage today, because you can see how many kids are there, right? That's important to know. These kids, if we don't intervene and if we don't want to interact and share faith, that picture is going to look a lot different in 10, 15 years, right? So I think that's really what I wanted you to know. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll move on to John and some announcements and lunch. God, we love your heart. And it's so good to know and to have it known that you want to be a part of our lives, God. God, I pray that we don't take that for granted, that we can share that with people, that we can be willing to interact with our kids, with our students, and just we're thankful that you're here, God. In your name I pray. Amen.
Thanks for listening. If this was meaningful to you, subscribe. Find out more about us at clearview.church, or, best of all, join us in person. We worship Sundays at 10 a.m. on the campus of LSU Shreveport.